With the assessment in the past 5 years, you are about to finish your term, but Thailand has been through many crises, like from the military government to elected government. And right now we are facing pandemic COVID-19. What's your recommendation in terms of policy restructuring for the economy to cope with the future?
No, thank you for asking these questions. The challenge ahead for Thailand is economic restructuring, as you have pointed out. We have discussed about the needs for restructuring for quite some time in many circles in Thailand. But the progress, I must say, has not been as fast as we would like to see. The COVID pandemic has basically fast-forwarded the challenges that we have to face. And so it enhanced the needs for restructuring. We need to focus more on economic restructuring because the post-COVID world will be very different from the pre-COVID world. And the restructuring will have to occur at different levels of the Thai economy and Thai society. I'll give you an example. This is the first time in 2 decades that we see migration from cities back to rural areas. During the past 2 decades, we have seen people from the rural areas moving into big cities, moving to Bangkok, moving to major tourist destinations, moving into industrial estate zones. But because of the pandemics, we're now seeing millions of Thai people moving back to the rural economy. And these people may not be able to return to their professions, their occupations pre-COVID, because the skills requirement will be much different post-COVID. The challenge for us is how can we create rural economy with a much stronger foundation, so that these people can become important forces in the rural economy, strengthening the rural economy, because of the migrations from the rural economy into cities during the past 2 decades have also created a lot of problems for the Thai societies.
So what should be the role of the government as the organization or as the only sector still have the most budget left at the moment to fight with COVID-19, because other stakeholders in Thai society are declining in terms of their strength? So what should be the role of the government in terms of pushing economy forward?
Basically, 3 dimensions that we have to think of. One is to provide relief to those that have been affected by the pandemic. Secondly is the roles of the government to stimulate the economy, to enhance economic recovery. And thirdly is to ensure that whatever the government is doing is facilitating restructuring of the Thai economy into the new structure that we would like to see. Unavoidable during the initial phase of the pandemic, the focus had to be on the relief, making sure that people could survive from the pandemic. But now I think the focus will have to be shifted, more emphasis will have to be given to enhancing economic recovery and also enhancing economic restructuring. Okay? And there are some important policies that will meet these 2 objectives. The most important one is to create massive jobs all over the country, particularly in the rural area. And these jobs will not only help those that have been affected, that have become unemployed or underemployed because of the pandemic, but it should also be jobs whereby these people can gain new skills, can have opportunity for retraining, so that they can become forces in the rural economy on a more sustainable basis. And this will help enhance recovery of the Thai economy at the same time as help restructure the Thai economy.
Looking back for your role as the Bank of Thailand governor, what is the most challenging aspect for you in the past 5 years?
I guess there are two aspects of jobs of the central bank. One is on preserving economic and financial stability, and the other dimension is to, I would call it, is a so-called developmental work to ensure that we can develop the financial system in such a way that would meet the requirements of the new world. On financial and economic stability, the challenges come from the fact that the world that we live in is becoming more volatile, more uncertain, more complex, and more ambiguous. We're living in the so-called VUCA world. To ensure stability, we need to look far ahead. We need to make sure that we can detect all signals of instability, future instability, and make sure that we take appropriate actions in time. We have to make sure that we don't leave behind any spots of fragility that could become a source of future crisis. And the volatility that we have gone through during the past 5 years come from many sources, and many of them were originated from outside Thailand, given the global economic and financial conditions. So we have to make sure that we are fully alert about all these potential sources of fragility and make sure that we take appropriate policy actions in time. In general, people, when talking about the roles of central bank, the mandate of preserving financial stability, in general, people don't appreciate the word stability when everything looks fine. Whenever a crisis emerges, then they will ask, why didn't the central bank do something 3 years or 5 years ago? So this is a challenge for any central bank. When we have our mandate of preserving stability, we have to look far ahead and we have to be able to implement policies that might not be appreciated by many interest groups in the society, because whatever measures that we implement, there will be people who will benefit from those measures, and also people will be losing stakes because of those measures. So that's to answer your question, that's the challenge related to the first part of the jobs on stability. On development, during the past 5 years, we have managed to push through a lot of initiatives in the financial system, particularly those related to digital payment, electronic payments, and also on improving market conduct of the financial system. But obviously, the existing players who had enjoyed the benefits, returns from the existing ways of conducting their business. The challenge is when we're trying to introduce new things, introduce new initiatives of a reform nature, we need to create the right incentive structures and making sure that there's a proper buy-in from all the stakeholders so that we can move these initiatives forward and get them implemented.
The world is so complicated and is facing crisis, especially from COVID-19 on global economy. So what would be your recommendation to the next Bank of Thailand governor?
The constraints for conducting policy have increased with COVID in at least 2 dimensions. The first dimension is related to the fact that policy space of almost all policies have become much more limited. Looking at the policy interest rates of the Bank of Thailand, during the pandemic, we had to lower our policy interest rate 3 times in a row, and it's now record low at 0.5%. So it's not much space for further reduction. It has become much more limited. So we have to make sure that we use that limited space wisely, taking into account the context and the challenges ahead of us. And the second constraint is related to the fact that the world will become much more uncertain as you have rightly pointed out, nobody knows how the COVID pandemic will come to an end and when it will come to an end, whether we will have a second wave or third wave or not. Even though we can manage to control the domestic pandemic quite well, but Thailand is a small open economy, and if the world will continue to face with increasing newly infected cases, that will have continue to have significant impacts on the Thai economy. So I guess this is a challenge that the new governor will have to deal with, which is much more difficult from during my 5 years term. It implies that the work of the Bank of Thailand over the next few years, we can't look at just only the policy tools or instruments within the mandate of the Bank of Thailand. We need to ensure that there is a very good coordination of various policies, ranging from monetary policies, exchange rate policies, financial policies, financial institution regulations policies, and also coordinations with fiscal policies, and most importantly, economic restructuring policies. This is an important period whereby we need to stimulate economic recovery while at the same time facilitating economic restructuring.